Yate Nana she ya Roderick Begain she don it Snenegi 20 Ojinational being betaught neighbors chain Kia on 8 shado sit na Gene Deshnale do Tedlana Eadet Nasha Salina Springs. So I'm a former Chinley Wildcat. So good luck to the Lady Cats down in Phoenix today. Back in October, we did a chapter 101, informing the public about some of the things that you may want to know about chapters. And then for the month of February, each Friday, we've been doing various topics. We began the month with the recent legislation, a proposed amendment to the Local Governance Act to allow virtual chapter meetings. And at the end of that presentation, I talked about how difficult it is to uh, amend the LGA. So primarily, you could do it one of two ways. The council could pass a resolution today, president signs tomorrow, and we would have to wait for 56 chapter resolutions. That's one way. Another way is if the council issued a memorandum, then I'm sorry, a council referendum. I'm sorry, council referendum. If they issued that and signed by the president, then that could go to the people for a ballot vote. There's also initiative, but those are the two primary ways to amend the LGA right now. And so, so when we were talking about that back at the beginning of the month, we talked about how can we amend the LGA is what we talked about last week, or reasons why we needed to amend the LGA. And I went over some of those topics last week. And so this week, I wanted to talk about, let's see. There you go. Last week, we talked about, reasons why the LGA needs to be amended. We explored how the laws affecting chapters have evolved before the LGA was passed and after the LGA was passed. And so, so now we have differences. If you have what was originally intended under the LGA, which was, chapters, you need to develop a file management system and you need to have this reviewed by Auditor General. And then you get it certified, and then you can exercise those authorities listed in Section 103 of Title 26. But now in 2024, now that after authorizations have been given over the past 26 years, chapters can handle housing discretionary funds, sales tax, the unhealthy food tax, and in 2010, we had the Attorney General opinion saying chapters, you can follow the template fiscal management system and also the template records management system. Over that course of time, we've been making these allowances that arguably could be inconsistent with the original intent of the LGA. So on this slide, you will see the basic framework on what I'm proposing, what I have been proposing for a couple of years now. During the pandemic, it was harder to communicate, these four models, but these are things I've been working with chapters for many, many years. And so I work with the LGA, the fire management system, chapter policies. I work with it on a daily basis, and I receive questions from chapter officials, chapter staff, council delegates. All those questions relating to chapters. What is the legal status or the legal question? What's the answer to this legal question? And sometimes we don't have the answer. The answer would best be provided if there was an amendment to the Local Governance Act. So in these four models, I'm just, again, this is a bird's eye view of the four models I'm proposing. In the next few slides, we'll go into a lot more detail. So just very basically, model one, what if we certified the remaining chapters? And we'll talk about the reasons for that. And then also, what if we changed our laws to say that the chapter president or the vice president supervised the chapter manager? So that's model one. And model two, there are those who believe that, hey, I worked really hard to become governance certified. You shouldn't just certify the other chapters. They haven't worked towards that yet. And so, okay, what if we kept the 65 non-governance certified chapters, but we gave those chapters a small amount of authority in order to make legal sense of all of the authorizations that have been given to them for the past 26 years. That's another framework. So, if you want to keep 65 non-governance certified chapters, fine. But I do need them to have some additional authorities in order to make legal sense of what we've been doing for 26 years. And then under model two, it's similar to model one. They chapter president or vice president supervise the manager or the community service coordinator. And really, if you really think and dive deep into it, we're kind of like a mix of model one and model two right now. And I'll explain that here in the next few slides. Under model three, similar to my model number one, okay, let's consider certifying the remaining 65 chapters. But supervision is not going to be by chapter officials. The chapter managers are going to be appointed, and they serve at the pleasure of either the chapter membership or the alternative form of government. And we covered the AFOG last week. So, if you don't remember what those are, then I suggest you tune in for that. But basically, the idea is we take supervision out of the chapter officials and put it into a body and say these are now at will employees. Model number four, very briefly, is again similar to model number two. We keep the 65 as non-governance certified, but because there's, again, you're either LGA or non-LGA. Okay, so the employee status, I covered that last week. It's different. So if they're different, you're going to have CSCs at non-LGA certified chapters, and you're going to have managers at LGA certified chapters. So the supervision would be different. CSCs would remain under ASC as we have today, and then managers would be similar to Model 3, this idea of the appointment. What if we move towards appointment? So So let's dive into Model 1 a little bit more closely. Okay, so last week and in October of last year, what I revealed to everyone was, guess what? Winderock has been asking chapters, please develop your own five management system. Um, and if you do that, then uh, you can become LGA certified. Okay. But please, please create your own. And five chapters have done that. 5 out of 110. Okay. Have their own unique five management system. But that's a small percentage. The remaining 45 or the remaining 40 chapters that are LGA certified, they have either adopted the 2007 five management system or the 2010 five management system. And if you're, again, this makes more sense if you tuned in last week. But basically, we created these templates, a template for fiscal, procurement, property management, records management, and personnel management. We created these templates to streamline the process to help chapters become LGA certified. But to date, only 45 chapters are governance certified. So we still have 65 that are not governance certified. I like saying not governance certified, but it's, and I also say non-LGA, LGA certified, same thing. But the point is, we still have 45 that are only 45 that are LGA certified. Out of 110, 65, a majority, is still not governance certified. So, can we say that the LGA experiment has failed? LGA has been in existence for 26 years. And in 26 years, less than half of the chapters have not become governance certified. That to me defines a failure. The experience has failed. Let's move on. Let's try something different. And then there's a loss of incentive, in my opinion, because what have we been doing? And some of this I covered last week. We're giving chapters, even though they're not LGA certified, we're giving them the power to handle PEP, sales tax, unhealthy food tax. We're issuing legal opinions from Department of Justice saying that even though the LGA, the law says you cannot operate under your five management system until it's certified, here's an AG opinion. We're going to legally protect all of the remaining chapters that are not LGA certified. And we're going to say, here's 2 out of the 5. We need you, chapters. Since you're not becoming LGA certified, we still need you to follow at least 2 out of the 3. And so we're basically, in a sense, we're giving them authority to exercise fiscal responsibility. We're giving them the ability to exercise records management responsibility. And so One of the things that I was thinking about when I was thinking, how would this solve things for us today in 2026? And I covered some of this last week. And one of the things that I keep hearing complaints of is DOJ or DCD. Why are you treating these chapters differently? We should be able to treat them on the same level. And I agree, except that's not what Navajo leadership agreed to 26 years ago. They created these differences, and so we have to deal with those differences today. So if times have changed, if I can get a majority of those Navajo leaders to say, you know what, you're right, that experiment has failed. Let's move on. Let's just treat chapters on the same level, and have, they all start fresh, so to speak, as being able to exercise Section 103 powers. And again, Section 103 has all the powers, like the power to contract, the power to lease, the power to enter into agreements with other chapters, the power to enter into intergovernmental agreements, the power to hire your own attorney. There's all of these different powers that LGA certified chapters can do, which means if you're not governance certified chapters, you can't do any of those things. So it creates these differences. Let's get rid of those differences, certify them all. But okay, so it's not all positive, right? It's not all positive. There are some negatives, because when chapters that are governance certified, if they get audited, if and when they get audited, there are audit findings. And so some of them come back with negative audit findings. And what we can tell from that is they are not able to demonstrate that they can follow their five management system. And so, and a part of that is lack of capacity. We put the chapter manager, we hire one executive, we have one administrative assistant, and for the most part, chapters are trying to work with PEP budgets and everything to hire additional chapter personnel, but they're not permanent. And so how can you have two people basically run an entire five management system effectively? And so there's some obviously some holes that we can't fix if we hold on to this LGA structure. And so I realize that, but at the same time, one of the recent things I've been involved with is an effort called chapter capacity building, where, the, divisions are coming, could be brought together to provide trainings, online trainings for chapters, like, for example, grant writing. I thought that was a good idea because that hasn't been done in the past. A training on grant writing to help chapters navigate those things. And if these were online trainings, maybe more chapters would excel. So even though there's a lack of capacity right now today, maybe we can fix that down the road. And so So, again, it's not all rosy, hunky-dory, but if we deal with the negatives, we could have successful chapters. And the other thing too is everybody focuses on the newspaper ads or newspaper stories about chapters doing bad. We don't we don't talk about the chapters that are doing great things. And so that's probably something we need to highlight. Instead of just focusing on the bad, there are chapters out there that are doing very well. So, there was an idea, or they're outside in the state system. They have council manager systems, and those manager council systems, they have forums where they advise one another. So those municipal governments, they feed off of each other. They teach one another, and if we're going to, we could probably bring that to chapters. Have chapters basically teach one another and get to that capacity level. So, anyway, when those are some things I was just thinking about under Model 1. And that's certifying the remaining 65 chapters. That's one framework. The second part of the framework under this Model 1 is supervision. How do we deal with supervision? And last week I talked about what the history has been. At the beginning, we had chapter officials supervising. And then after that, we had council delegates supervising. And when the LGA was passed, council delegates continued to supervise. And therefore, there's this provision that I'm have here. Elected officials are prohibited from direct involvement in the management and operations of the chapter administration. That's the law still on the books today. Okay, but that wasn't amended in 1999 when the CSC program was merged into the LGSC, Local Government Support Center program. It went from legislative branch to executive branch. And so under the legislative plan, there was a system of direct local supervision. And so they basically carried that over when it went under LGSC. And so that's been operating like that for many, many years without amending Section 1001E. And so when decentralization came in 2014, that was removed. Direct local supervision was removed. But then we reinstated it in 2018. And then in 2022, the ASC plan of operation was amended to say that, hey, chapter officials, you got to have training. If you're non-LGA certified, you can't become a direct local supervisor until you get this training. So, so there's all of these different ways that we've been dealing with supervision. Okay. And so if we're going to keep what we've been doing for 22 out of the 26 years of the LGA's existence, then we need to cross out this law. We need to delete this law saying that elected officials are prohibited in the direct involvement in the management and operations of the chapter administration. At the very least, we need to delete the word management. And if we're going to keep language saying elected officials are prohibited from the direct involvement in the operations of the chapter administration, if we keep that, then we need to redefine or clarify what are the legislative functions and what are the executive functions of the chapter. Last week, I talked about back in 1980, there was a plan of operation for chapter officials. And in 1995, the Office of Navajo Government Development said that those duties and responsibilities are mostly administrative functions. So the proposal basically was chapter officials should just be legislators, and it should be the staff that carry out the executive functions, And that's what the LGA said. We're going to operate under separation of powers, checks and balances. There's going to be a legislative side of chapter and then the executive side. But we operate under today a hybrid because we still have those old 1980 duties and responsibilities. So we need to clarify that. The positives for supervision here again would be justifying what we've been doing since 1999 when the CSC program merged into the LGSC program. Today, we have chapter officials as direct local supervisors. So let's, if we're used to that and we're going to continue with that, then let's amend the LGA to allow for it. The negative, obviously, is the amount of grievances that arise. And, if a manager or grieves their disciplinary action, they win their case, then the chapter needs to start looking for funds, especially if they get back pay awarded. They need to start looking for funds. And so so there's some potential liability there by just authorizing outright by law that chapter officials can supervise the chapter managers or the executive officials. So again, so there's positives and negatives there. No questions so far. So I'll move on to Model 2. Okay, like I said at the beginning, Model 2 is keeping the idea that, all right, we're going to keep non-governance certified chapters. Currently, there's 65 of them. But what I'd like to propose is that some of those LGA certified chapter authority that's listed in Section 103 of Title 26, it's not really a big power. And in addition to that, we have at DOJ made legal accommodations for how we operate here in 2024. So what I mean by that here is if you look at the comparison, 1998 chapters, you need to have your file management system in order to acquire, sell, or lease property. Well, that means if you're not LGA certified, you don't have any of those powers. But today, we do have intragovernmental office space use agreements. We allow the use of rentals, even though they're not LGA certified. Allow the rentals of chapter office space or chapter buildings. And so what if we gave them a little bit of authority? What if non-LGA certified chapters could lease or acquire and sell property with a value up to $100,000? And I put $100,000 because chapters also have expensive, heavy equipment. So it's not necessarily buildings we're talking about here. It's all of the property that chapters gain. Even though they're not government certified, they gained ownership of these heavy equipment and through the use of ARPA and CARES Act funds and other, CHSN funds, So what if, we can justify all of that if we gave them a little bit amount of authority? Same with contracts with other chapters. Like I talked about last week, chapters want to regionalize, create regional councils where, they'd be able to contract with one another. But if you're not LGA certified, then you can't contract. But if everybody wants to contract to regionalized services, why not allow that to happen? Why does that have to be an LGA certified chapter power? Why can't it be a power that all chapters have? The other next one is executing contracts. If you're not LGA certified, all of your contracts need to go through the 164 review process, and President Nygren has to sign it on behalf of your chapter. Why? Because Section 103 says only government certified chapters can execute contracts. Okay, so that's not how it realistically can work out. So my proposal is, why not just allow non-LGA certified chapters to contract up to $100,000? And why did I focus on $100,000 here again? Because under the Navajo Nation's procurement policy, we used to have a small purchase threshold amount, which was $50,000. That has since increased to $100,000 under the Procurement Act amendments. And so it would make sense that if we allowed non-LGA certified chapters to enter into small contracts, from the nation's perspective, as a small contract, then that would allow them to handle things at the local level, not have to go through the 164 review process. And then lastly, another one is imposing fees, burial fees, use of or charging of all of these different fees that chapters have now. Trash services, that again, it's an LGA certified chapter power, but why not allow chapters to help with their revenue and legally justify the chapters obtaining those fees? So that's basically the framework of Model 2. If we're going to keep 65, if we're going to say 45 LGA certified, 65 you stay as non-government certified. So that's fine. That's fine. But you gotta allow the non-LGA certified chapters to do something. A little bit of authority, not all of the authority, just a little bit. So there's some additional frameworks for Model 2, which is, and actually this goes for all four models, is having chapters, the remaining 65, Remember earlier I said since 1984, we're like, please chapters, develop your own five management system. And now, 40 years later, we haven't. They haven't. 65 haven't done that. So, okay, now we're not asking anymore. We're going to insist and impose that the 65 adopt. Just basically start following the new five management system. And right now, my office is trying to coordinate efforts to update all five management systems. And so it would be a package deal. Not only would we have LGA amendments, we would have also updated five management systems. And we're not going to bother the 45 that have already adopted their five management system. So we're not forcing the 45 to adopt our new five management system. They can choose to pass their own local ordinance to adopt our five management system that's developed, that's updated. But we're not going to impose that upon them. We're only imposing it on the current 65. And then with regards to supervision, it's the same as Model 1. We're just going to legally, by law, express that chapter officials, primarily the president and vice president, will supervise the CSCR manager. And again, earlier I stated how we operate today in 2026. It's kind of mix of both right now, because non-LGA certified chapters, the law says you don't have fiscal management authority, but then today they do have fiscal management authority under the 2010 AG opinion. And so chapters, you can the junk food tax is another example. Here are all of these projects that, whether you're governance certified or not, you can administer from those funds. And so they're gaining authority. They kind of look like an LGA certified chapter from the outside. If you're a member of the public and you didn't read the law, then from the outside you're thinking, oh, they kind of look like an LGA certified chapter. And then remember last week I said some chapters that are not LGA certified, they say, I don't know yet to become LGA certified. My neighboring chapter is LGA certified, is struggling, even though they're LGA certified. I don't want any of that. I have everything I need. I have the ability to handle money. I have the ability to spend my sales tax money. That's all I need. And so there's no incentives or the loss of incentives to become LGA certified. So some of the positives keeps the original intent for Model 2. The positives for Model 2. Okay, so if we're going to keep this non-LGA versus LGA certified, and we give non-LGA certified chapters a little bit of authority, okay, we'll keep that. We'll keep the original intent, because we only give them a little bit of authority. If they want all the glorified authorities listed in Section 103, they need to go seek certification by RDC, Resources and Development Committee, and then they become governance certified. But for now, they only have a little bit of authority. That's it. So that's the idea. It keeps the original intent of the LGA of creating those differences, and then again, authorizing just limited authority. While keeping the original intent is a positive, it can also be a negative. And I talked about that last week. Okay, why do we keep creating these different rules? When I issue a memo, send it to all the chapters, I have to send a memo saying, okay, if you're non-LGA certified, this is what applies to you. If you're governance certified, this is what applies to you. And so, or we issue, we sometimes issue different memos. And so, if we want to, keep doing that, I guess it's up to leadership if they want to keep creating these differences. So that's basically Model 2. LGA was enacted into law. It's actually 26 years ago. Why aren't chapters getting certified? And we cover, highly suggest that you look at last week's video, and we covered a lot of that, an hour's worth of, some of those topics. But just to give a brief answer on that question, there's a loss of incentive. At the beginning, when LGA was passed, it says chapters, you got to do all of these things, and then you get the golden bucket of authorities over in Section 103. So if you haven't gotten certified, you can't exercise one of those. But along the way, we have been giving them some authorities. And so there's a loss of incentive. Like I said earlier, chapters are like, Adoniyata, becoming LGA certified. There's no reason for me. I got everything I need right now. Why should I pursue LGA certification when I have everything I need right now? And so that's why I say the LGA experiment has failed. And so, just very briefly, I will say that with regards to your question of why chapters are not becoming governance certified. But again, I suggest you look at last week's video, and we talked a lot about that very issue. Okay, moving on to model number 3. Model number 3 is very similar to model number 1 in terms of the framework of, hey, let's just certify all the chapters. We'll have 110 LGA certified chapters. We will have all chapters having Section 103 powers and authorities. We don't have to differentiate between the two types of chapters. The 65 would have to adopt the new template that we're creating, the 5 management system template. And then the original 45 that are governance certified today, again, they can keep their existing 5 management system. But if they want to go through the ordinance process in order to adopt the 2024 version of the 5 management system, they can choose to do that. So again, that's very similar to model number 1. What's different in model 3 is supervision. And here I'm proposing that, okay, we've had chapter officials supervise, we've had ASC supervise, we've had council delegates supervising, but we've never had the community or the legislative body supervise the executive official of the chapter. So this is nothing new. The alternative forms of government that we have today, they operate under this. Okay, so I'm not introducing anything new. I'm just suggesting maybe rolling this out across Navajo land to all 110 chapters, what would happen is the chapter president would appoint a chapter manager. The appointment would go to a chapter meeting, and the appointment would be confirmed. So just like the division directors here in Window Rock, division directors get appointed by president. They go through and they go to council and they get confirmed by council. Same idea. And if you look at some of how the city governments operate, especially when they're that council manager form of government, it is the manager that's appointed and then confirmed and serves at the pleasure of the council. That operates off Navajo. And so this all ties back into the 1985 memorandum by the Office of Navajo Government Development. Okay, so they're looking from the outside and they're saying, "Oh, we should bring some of that to Navajo," but it never made it to the LGA. Right? That's what we talked about last week. A lot of the things that were proposed in '95 didn't make it to the 1998 version of the LGA. But there are little things that made it into the LGA, and alternative forms of government is one piece that made it into the LGA. And so this legislative, executive functions, appointment, confirmations, idea that is in today's law as an AFOG. Chapters that do have AFOG governments. And in an AFOG government, when your council is formed, community members can come to your meeting, but it's the council that votes. It's kind of like me going into the council chambers. I don't have a vote. We have an elected body, and they vote on those matters. So that at the local level would be similar. We would not have quorum issues and things of that sort under if everyone went under an AFOG type of system. But going back to Model 3 on supervision, you would have the manager serve as an at-will employee serving at the pleasure of the community. If you're still a traditional chapter government, you still have chapter meeting. The registered voters still vote in your chapter meeting. Then they could pass a resolution to remove the manager because they're an at-will employee, then they can't grieve. Okay, they don't have any grievance rights. And then alternatively, if you're an AFOG, then this chapter manager would serve at the pleasure of the alternative form of government. So if you have a council government, then the chapter council could pass a resolution to remove the chapter manager. So some of the positives behind this would be it keeps the idea of separation of powers and checks and balances, executive functions versus legislative functions. It keeps that intact. Under Section 1001E, that says chapter officials are prohibited in the management operation of the chapter administration. It keeps that intact. We don't have to delete that. What about grievances? We get rid of grievances by, chapter managers. So obviously, again, it's not all rosy. It's not all rosy. So negatives is that at-will employment has not been practiced at the local level. Only AFOGs are practicing it right now. So This would be something new. And so sometimes introducing something new on a wide scale level can be met with resistance. So that's why I anticipate with regards to Model 3. Let's move on to Model 4. Model 4, the proposal is kind of like a mishmash of models 1, 2, and 3, and 4. I mean, I'm sorry, model 1, 2, and 3. So similar to model option 2, there's going to be 65 chapters that still remain as non-LGA certified. They will be required to adopt the template file management system. And we provide them with small authorities. They can contract with other chapters. They can impose fees, burial plot fees. And so we give them a small amount of authority. With regards to supervision, that's where Model 4 is different. So it really is, it would be different because if you're keeping 65 versus 45, if you're still keeping that, then you have to deal with supervision differently. So if you're governance certified, an option is to have them appointed, have that appointment system. But if you're not LGA certified, then they're not chapter employees, and therefore they're Navajo Nation employees, which we covered last week, and therefore they would still be under ASC of DCD, and so we would still have this direct local supervision concept, and so we would maintain that under Model 4. So positives, it's a mix of the old and the new, and which is also a negative. Again, are we going to keep this differences in place? If so, great. But if not, then we have the other two models to work with, and some of the things that how we've been doing things regarding supervision, and the history behind that. We could solidify how we're going to do those things moving forward. So again, the mixing of the old and the new, and how we've been operating in 2024, those would all be justified if we make these legal amendments, make legal justifications, and say this is how we're going to operate from 2024 into the future until the LGA is amended again. All right, so let me see. There's another question. If the LGA became law, some chapter house certified and some are still not. Is that because of resisting to change? That's one reason. Like I said, whether it's resistance to change or lack of incentives to become LGA certified, or many of the other reasons that we covered last week, those are all possible reasons about why chapters are not moving forward with governance certification. All right, so moving on to, so those are just the basic frameworks I'm looking at. So if you look at and you think about it, there's those 4 basic frameworks. There also needs to be other amendments to the LGA. And so these next these next few slides will be talking about what amendments do we need to, what other amendments do we need to have, no matter which model you pick, which amendments need to happen. One of them is, how do you amend the five amendment system? You know, originally you went through this whole public hearing process. You got it before the people voted. Then you went to Auditor General. Then it went reviewed by the old SAS process or 164 review process. And then finally it got to RDC, and then RDC reviewed it. How do you amend it after going all of these reviews? Well, one way that makes sense is the ordinance process. You got to read and write, read in Navajo and English the underlying strikeouts to the community at 2 consecutive chapter meetings, and then you vote on the change at a 3rd chapter meeting. That provides enough notice to the community that, hey, we're changing a part of the five management system. Okay, so my proposal in 98, they don't talk about it. And in 2024, maybe this year, we say that as part of one of the ordinances that chapters can pass is amending the five management system. Here's another one: clarifying the ordinance versus referendum process. So if you look at Title 26, Section 2001, there's 2 different processes in there. One is you don't need a ballot, and then another one is, oh, you need to have this chapter question be sent to a ballot vote. So, for example, if you want to create an alternative form of government, you got to have a ballot vote. If you want to impose a local tax, ballot vote. But it's all in one law. Okay, so my proposal is to create 2 different sections in order to clarify that process, because I don't know how many meetings I've had with the election administration, Navajo Board of Election Supervisors, and others to talk about, how does the sales tax, process go? How do chapters amend their quorum requirement? And so there are these different processes that nobody seemed to coordinate with Section 2001 of the LGA. So that's another thing that I would propose. Another thing is the LGA, or the eliminating Nabakiatik committee approval from the certain agreements. So if you're LGA certified, you can enter into intergovernmental agreements with the federal and other entities, but you need approval by Nabakiatik committee. Well, in 26 years, LGA certified chapters are not doing that. They have agreements with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They have agreements with U.S. Department of Energy. And so who's following this in 2024? Answer: nobody. So let's just eliminate that. Declaring a state of emergency. Here's what the law says in 1998. But again, last week we covered chapters are entities of delegated authorities. Well, they haven't been delegated the power to declare a state of emergency. Council gave that power to the Commission on Emergency Management. Okay. But today there's this confusion. Do they have the ability or not? And let's put it in the law. Let's clarify that chapter presidents can declare state of emergency. Let's just say it outright. That way we comply with what the leader said in 98 in terms of delegated authority, and we clarify the old law that's for the Commission on Emergency Management. Here's some other possible amendments. decertifying a chapter as a chapter. I went through that old 1958 law last week. Chapters, if you're going to create a chapter, then you need to make sure there's more than 1,000 people in each of the surrounding chapters, and there is a need to create an additional chapter in your area, in your community. 86 chapters didn't go through that process. So we have some smaller chapters, so how do we certify them? And then what about if you're going to governance certify everyone, how do you decertify them? And what does that process look like? And what are the sanctions that can be imposed? That's, again, up for debate. Requiring the Auditor General to review proposed amendments to the file management system. Again, there's nothing in the law that says this is how chapters amend their file management system. So, chapters are amending their file management system without anybody reviewing if those amendments are compliant with the governmental accounting standards, if it complies legally. Imposing provisions for that, requiring chapters to use attorney contracts recommended by DOJ. That comes from the 2012 draft of the Local Empowerment Act. So, incorporating that in, clarifying what nonprofit corporations are by chapters. We have an old 1986 law that says chapters can create nonprofit corporations, but the 12 years later, when the LGA was passed, that wasn't amended. And so how do you reconcile both of those laws? Because neither one of them talks to anyone. So sorry that was, let me just briefly thank OPVP for this platform, Attorney General Branch, for giving us this opportunity to teach the public about these things. And I hope you all enjoyed the series. Hagon net.